Daniel wasn't supposed to get involved, but the gorilla cub was already watching him. Not moving, not making a sound, just holding onto the fence. She wasn't hiding, wasn't running, just standing there at the wire, both hands wrapped around the chain link like she'd been waiting for someone to show up. Her eyes found Daniel's the moment he stepped into the clearing, and they didn't let go. He'd been in Bwindi 6 weeks. He knew what the rangers said. That cub won't survive out here, and worse, if it gets too close to people, it won't stay safe. He took a step back. The cub didn't move. He took another. She just watched him. No fear, no aggression, just that same locked stare, like she'd already made a decision he hadn't caught up to yet. That night, Daniel left food near the fence line. Not close, not obvious, just a piece of fruit set at the base of a post, 20 feet from where she'd stood. He told himself it wasn't involvement, it was observation. Next morning it was gone. No cub, no sign, just the empty ground and a single small handprint pressed into the mud beside the post. The second night he left more, gone by dawn. Third night, water too, gone. The distance between the food and the fence stayed the same. He kept it measured, kept it controlled. He documented everything in his field notebook the way he'd been trained. Time, quantity, behavior observed, behavior inferred. But one thing didn't fit neatly into the notebook. She kept coming back, not just for the food. That was what changed things. By the end of the second week, she was arriving before he set anything out, sitting at the same spot on the fence, waiting. One morning he came out with nothing. No fruit, no water, kit still packed, and she was already there. She didn't look at the ground where the food usually went. She looked at him. Just that, just looked. And Daniel stood there in the early Bwindi mist with his notebook open and his pen uncapped, and he didn't write a single word. Because that's when he understood, this wasn't about food anymore. Routines have a way of becoming something else without you noticing. What started as controlled observation, timed visits, measured distance, documented behavior, became something he stopped timing, stopped measuring. He'd arrive at the fence line in the morning, and she'd already be there, and they'd exist in the same silence for 20 minutes, sometimes 30, and he'd tell himself he was still just watching. Amara didn't say anything for a while. That was its own kind of warning. The cub started responding to him specifically, not to the other researchers, not to the rangers. When Daniel moved left along the fence, she tracked him. When he crouched, she'd shift her weight, not mimicking, something different, anticipating. She was learning him. Her behavior near other humans didn't change. She stayed skittish, distant, quick to disappear into brush. But with Daniel, the distance kept shrinking. 18 feet, 12 feet, 8. She wasn't closing the gap all at once. She was testing it, one slow increment at a time, pausing, watching his reaction, then holding the new distance for days before moving again. That was the part that unsettled Amara enough to finally speak. "She's not visiting anymore," he said one evening, quiet, watching the tree line where she'd disappeared. "She's waiting." Daniel didn't answer, because Amara was right, and they both knew what came next. A cub that waits for a human loses something. Not immediately, not obviously. But the instinct to fear, the instinct that keeps a wild animal alive, starts to dull the moment it starts to trust. And trust, out here, was a slow way to die. The rangers called a meeting. Not aggressive, not accusatory, just direct. The senior warden laid it out plainly. The cub was showing signs of human habituation. If it continued, she couldn't be safely released deeper into the forest. She'd drift toward settlements, toward roads, toward people who wouldn't leave fruit at a post and keep their distance. Daniel listened, nodded, said the right things. That night he didn't go to the fence. Neither did he the next morning. By the third day he was back. Not with food, just standing there, telling himself it was a final check, a responsible wind down. She was already at the fence when he arrived. She hadn't stopped coming. She'd just been waiting longer. And she wasn't moving toward the usual spot on the ground anymore. She was facing him, still, steady, and she didn't look away until he did. Daniel closed his notebook that evening without writing a single entry. He sat outside his tent for a long time, listening to the forest settle into night sounds. The distant bark of a hornbill, the low creak of fig trees, somewhere far north, the deep chest rumble of an adult male moving through darkness. She was out there. He knew exactly where. And that was the problem. Because Daniel had spent 11 months documenting animals he never touched, never fed, never allowed to know his name. He had rules. He had training. He had 11 months of clean professional distance. And he had a cub who was learning to wait for a specific human. And that human kept showing up. It wasn't just visiting anymore. It was waiting. And Daniel was running out of reasons to keep showing up, and running out of reasons to stop. 1 year later, everything was different, and nothing was. Daniel had gone home in March, finished his documentation contract, filed his reports, packed his field notebooks into a duffel bag and boarded a flight out of Entebbe without looking back. He'd done the responsible thing, told himself the distance would reset everything for her, and for him. He was back in Bwindi by April. He told his editor it was a follow-up assignment. He told Amara it was unfinished research. He didn't tell anyone the real reason, because he hadn't fully admitted it to himself yet. But the morning he walked back to the fence line, notebook in hand, camera around his neck, every professional habit carefully reassembled, he knew within 30 seconds that something had changed. She was there. Bigger. Noticeably bigger. The soft roundness of a 10-month cub had started sharpening into something with more weight behind it, more presence. Her shoulders had broadened, her hands on the fence wire were larger, fingers thicker. She looked less like something that needed protecting, and more like something that was deciding whether you did. But she'd come to the fence, and she'd come alone. Daniel didn't move for a long time, just stood at his usual distance, 12 feet, the last distance she'd settled at before he left, and watched her, documented, kept his breathing steady and his posture neutral the way Amara had taught him in the first weeks. She watched him back. Then she did something he hadn't seen before. She let go of the fence, not to leave. She stepped back from the wire, one deliberate move, and sat down in the grass on her side. Just sat. Relaxed posture, weight settled, no tension in her shoulders, like she was getting comfortable for something that was going to take a while. Daniel's pen stopped moving. In gorilla behavior, proximity initiation means something specific. It isn't affection the way humans perform affection. It's a calculated social signal. I am not threatened by you. I am choosing to be near you. Adult gorillas do it within troops to signal alliance. They do it with familiar individuals to communicate something that doesn't have a clean scientific label but that every field researcher recognizes when they see it. She wasn't eating, wasn't exploring, wasn't doing anything except being near him on purpose. 3 days passed like that. Same time each morning, same spot. She'd arrive, let go of the fence, sit. Daniel would stand at his distance. Neither of them pushed it further. It had the quality of something being negotiated in a language that didn't use words. On the 4th morning she moved closer, not to the fence, past it. The gate on the research side had been left unlatched. Daniel hadn't noticed. She had. She pushed through it slowly, no rush, no alarm, and crossed to his side of the fence line. Daniel didn't move, didn't speak. His heart was doing something loud and unhelpful in his chest, but his body stayed still because every piece of training he had said, do not react, do not escalate, let the animal lead. She stopped 4 feet from him, looked up, and then she reached out, one hand slow and deliberate, and touched the edge of his field notebook, not grabbing, not pulling, just touching, the way you'd confirm something was real. She held it there for 3 seconds, then she pulled her hand back, turned, walked back through the gate, and disappeared into the brush without looking behind her. Daniel stood in that spot for a long time after she was gone. Amara found him there 20 minutes later, still holding the notebook open to a page he hadn't written on. She remembered you, Amara said, not surprised, not alarmed, just stating it the way you state weather. Daniel nodded slowly. After a year, she didn't forget him, and that was the moment he understood that what had started at a fence line 11 months ago had never really been about food, or distance, or documentation. It had been about something that didn't have an entry in any field manual he'd ever read. The experts arrived on a Thursday, not dramatically, no vehicles with logos, no uniforms, no sense of emergency, just 2 conservation biologists from the Uganda Wildlife Authority and a primatologist named Dr. Osei, who had spent 20 years studying human-wildlife habituation in Central Africa. They came with clipboards and quiet voices, and the particular kind of calm that people carry when they've seen this situation before and know exactly how it ends. They reviewed Daniel's field notes, watched the footage, asked measured questions and wrote down measured answers. Dr. Osei spent a long time looking at the gate, the unlatched gate, the one she'd pushed through on the 4th morning without saying anything. Then he sat down across from Daniel and said it plainly. She's not in danger yet, but she will be if this continues. Not because of Daniel. He was careful, he was trained, he understood the boundaries even when he struggled to hold them. But she didn't know that other humans weren't Daniel. That was the problem. She had learned that humans, one specific human, were safe, and that lesson, left uncorrected, would generalize. It would spread from Daniel to every person she encountered. Tourists, farmers, poachers working the forest edges, people who would not stand still and let her touch a notebook and walk away unharmed. Her trust in him was the most dangerous thing about her. The protocol was straightforward. Controlled reduction of contact. No sudden withdrawal that carried its own risks, its own behavioral consequences. Just a slow, structured stepping back. Increase the distance. Reduce the frequency. Let her redirect toward the troop, toward the forest, toward the life she was supposed to be living. Daniel agreed to everything. He meant it. That was the thing people wouldn't understand later when he tried to explain it. He genuinely meant every word. He understood the biology. He understood the stakes. He wasn't someone who put his own feelings above an animal's survival. He just hadn't accounted for her having her own opinion about it. The reduction started the following Monday. 12 feet became 20. Daily visits became every other day. He stopped arriving at the same time each morning, varied the schedule the way Dr. Osei recommended, so she couldn't build a new waiting pattern around a new routine. She adjusted, slower than he expected, but she adjusted. The fence visits became less frequent. She was spending more time north of the research perimeter, closer to where the troop ranged. Amara reported seeing her travel with 2 juvenile females from the main group. A good sign, the best possible sign. Daniel documented it all. Clean entries, precise timestamps, professional language. He did not write down how the clearing felt different in the mornings now. The last time she came, he almost missed it. He was breaking down his equipment on a Thursday afternoon, flight out of Entebbe on Saturday. Everything packed, the research station returning to its baseline quiet. He was carrying a case to the vehicle when he saw her at the fence line. Not at the gate, just at the fence, standing the way she had that very first morning, both hands on the wire, still watching him. Except she was larger now, and the watching had a different quality to it, less uncertain, more like recognition. Daniel set the case down. He walked to his usual spot, not 12 feet, not 20, just the natural distance the moment seemed to call for. He stood there and she stood there, and the Bwindi forest made its sounds around them, and neither of them moved for a long time. She didn't push through the gate. He didn't step closer. After a while, he couldn't have said how long. She loosened her grip on the fence, one hand first, then the other. She dropped back onto all fours, turned toward the tree line, and walked into the forest without pausing. No looking back, no hesitation, just gone. Daniel stood at the fence until the light started changing. Amara came and stood beside him and didn't say anything, which was the right thing to do. On the flight home, somewhere over the Congo Basin, Daniel opened his field notebook to write the final entry. He sat for a long time with the pen uncapped and the page blank. Then he wrote one line, not a data point, not an observation, just the only thing that felt honest. He tried not to get involved, but some bonds don't ask permission.